Hello and welcome back, everybody. Welcome to the Ask Abhijit show. Today we are doing episode 235, and I hope you're all doing very well. So before we take the questions, which I'm going to take from the comments, let's see who all is there on the live chat. As always, I can see Mahita Bushetti, Abhi Chandel 05, right winger Surinder Gupta, Amar Singh, Geopolitical Dubey, Samarth Tripathi, Vidhi, Maniar 21 Topo ka salam. Bharat first, Ayush, Mr. 88ers, Sri Hari Arun, Hardik Rohila, Noel Kud Tarkar, Alvin Rodriguez, Manmat Tiwari, Aryan Raj, Om Bekherikar, hello, KGY Gamers, Anjali Mary, Skibidi, Sunil Chavare, Kuldeep Sarma, Just Ant, Bhushan, Shraddha Kulkarni, Prashant Mahasagar, Mr. Redbird, Abhishek Hela, Kanishk Raj in depth, Gaurav Satyaswamy S, Abhijit Supreme Lord, KGY Gamers, Vinit Savant, Pranay Paul from Kolkata, Brijesh SK, Saket Katari, Krishna Govinda, Alfred Raghunath Buldev Rai from the Surinamese Netherlands, Saket Rekha Humble. Who else do we have? Grim Reaper Plays, Abhishek Srivastav, Sachitarand, Somen Mitra, Prakhar Gupta, Ankita, McLovin. Happy Holi, everybody. Philip Shaimon, Kanishk, Ashish Singh, and so many other people. Ojaswini, Nitu Sharma, Neil Raval, Prashant Mahasagar, and everybody else. All right. Let's get going with the questions now. And we're going to take some questions. We're going to take the questions that you have asked in the comments. And afterwards, if there is some more time, we'll take some questions from the live chat as well. As always, there's a lot of questions. So where do we begin? Let's begin with question number one. What's question number one? It is by Krishna of the Surinamese Netherlands. How reliable is carbon dating? And what are the strengths and weaknesses of carbon dating? Yes, carbon dating is integral to our study of history and to historical research, archaeological research. So, what is carbon dating? How reliable is carbon dating? And what are the strengths and weaknesses? So, carbon dating is also called radiocarbon dating or carbon 14 dating. And it's one of the most widely used methods for determining the age of archaeological materials, organic materials. And this works for materials that are approximately up to 50,000 years old. And this method was developed, I think, in the first half of the 20th century, maybe in the 1940s. Okay. And the technique, it measures the decay of a carbon isotope called carbon 14. It's a radioactive isotope. And by doing this, you are estimating the time since the death of the organism, or of the organic material. So there are three kinds. There are three isotopes that we know of carbon. Carbon 12, carbon 13, carbon 14. Carbon 12 has 6 protons, 6 neutrons, 6 electrons, and the radionuclide carbon 14 has 8 neutrons. It has a half-life of about 6,000 or so years, maybe less than that, maybe 5,700 or so years. So carbon dating is used to estimate to a very precise degree the age of organic remains. So if you give me a piece of rock and tell me that let's carbon date this, it's not going to work because rock is not organic. It is an inorganic substance, material. It's a rock. But if you have a piece of bone, if you have a piece of wood, if you have a seashell, all this stuff is organic remains. And you can carbon date that. So it's effective in dating organic remains like these. And it can give you a very good estimate as to how old this material is. So that's the strength of carbon dating. It works pretty accurately for organic materials like wood and bones and such things up to about 50,000 years before today. So those are the strengths. The weaknesses is that, first of all, it only works for samples that are up to 50,000 years old. For older samples, it doesn't work. Why is that? Because of the half-life of this carbon 14 isotope. The half-life is about 5,700, 800 years. And because of that, it only works for samples up to 50,000 years old, and beyond this, there's very little carbon 14 that's left in older samples, which makes the dating accurate dating more challenging. So that's the weakness of carbon dating. And then there are other weaknesses, like samples can be contaminated by external sources of carbon, like modern pollution or ancient carbon from fossil fuels, which may have contaminated your sample. And there's also the problem of variations in the atmospheric carbon 14 fluctuations because of various reasons, like fossil fuel burning and nuclear testing. Above ground nuclear testing, which has happened a lot in the past century, in the 20th century, especially the 1950s, 1960s, etc. This significantly increased the amount of carbon 14 in the atmosphere. It's called the bomb pulse. It's called the bomb pulse or the bomb surge, and this, I believe, almost doubled the amount of carbon 14 in the atmosphere in the 20th century. And that can obviously cause problems if you don't account for the bomb surge, bomb pulse. So all these are the challenges which you have to address when you're doing carbon 14 dating. So carbon 14 dating for pre 1950s samples is reasonably unaffected by nuclear testing, but samples later than that, you have to account for the uh, nuclear testing bomb surge or bomb pulse in the atmosphere. So yeah, it's challenging. And its accuracy, the accuracy of radiocarbon dating, depends on how carefully you've prepared the sample, how much you've ensured that there is no contamination, and how well you have calibrated to account for historical variations in the amount of carbon 14 in the atmospheric in the atmosphere. So these are the strengths and weaknesses of carbon dating, radiocarbon dating, or carbon 14 dating. It's a pretty good uh, technique that we have for samples that are up to 50,000 years old. Okay, questions about Pakistan for a change. I usually don't take questions about Pakistan, but yes, things have happened of late. So let's talk about what's happening in Pakistan. Samarth asks, who is funding and arming militant groups like the Balochistan Liberation Army and the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, enabling attacks like the Jaffar Express thing that happened there, and missile strikes in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa? What triggered these attacks? Was it opposition to the China-Pakistan economic corridor, control over Balochistan's vast resources, or deeper geopolitical tensions with over 340 hostages rescued? Are you sure about that? That's what the Pakistani military is claiming. And casualties between 21 and 28, 29 people. That's again a claim by the Pakistani army. You have to take it with a bucket full of salt. And why is the Pakistani foreign ministry blaming India? What are the broader regional geopolitical implications? Nice language. Uh, P. Mahasagar says, is the recent train hijack in Balochistan and the whole Balochistan freedom movement from behind the doors funded by India? Balochis are doing it themselves, or is the US supporting them, or is China behind it? Or maybe somebody else? What's behind this? Siddharth says, as trains are getting hijacked in Pakistan by the Balochistan Liberation Army, are we going to see a free Balochistan in the near future? So, first of all, let me categorically say this. There is no Indian hand behind this. India does not support any any kind of military or other action that would target civilians. Okay, India doesn't do that, and India doesn't support any insurgencies in foreign nations. We are a peace-loving nation, and India has been at the receiving end of terrorism for decades. Pakistan and US sponsored and funded terrorism for decades in the 20th century and also in the 21st century. So we, having been at the receiving end of this, would never do anything that would lead to similar consequences in other nations, even if it's a nation like Pakistan, which is the global epicenter of terrorism. We would not do that. So let me categorically say this. India, there is no Indian hand behind this. The Pakistani foreign ministry will say such things. They are a bunch of liars. Okay? Sadly, it's true. It's true. And they will try and cover up their shortcomings and their intelligence failures and their military weakness and other weaknesses by blaming India for what happened. So there is no Indian hand behind this whatsoever. The Pakistani government may make such accusations, nothing surprising about it, but they are doing it only to cover up their weaknesses and their shortcomings and their failures, their catastrophic failures. So there was this all of this is being asked in the context of the recent hijacking of the Jaffar Express in Balochistan near in the Bolan region by the freedom fighters of Balochistan, the Balochistan Liberation Army. So what they did is they hijacked this train, they stopped it, they identified all the civilians, all the men, women, children, elderly, etc. They asked them to leave and go to safety. And there happened to be a large number, maybe more than 280 uh, more than 280 Pakistani army or military personnel on the train, and those individuals were captured by the Balochistan Liberation Army. And the BLA then gave the Pakistani government or military, whatever it is, a time of 48 hours to release all the civilians who have been illegally detained and thrown into prison by the Pakistani military. There's this operation going on in Balochistan. So they gave them 48 hours. The BLA gave the Pakistani military 48 hours to release these prisoners, and that did not happen. And then the BLA has released a statement saying that they have executed those 280 plus Pakistani military personnel. But the Pakistani government and military will say that they have rescued all the hostages, and so on and so forth. So there are two versions of what's happening. The Pakistani military will say that there have been very few casualties. We've rescued all the hostages, and just a few people have died, and we have liquidated all the Balochistan Liberation Army freedom fighters. That's what the Pakistani military will claim. The BLA has put out a statement saying that something very, very different, and what I just said. So who do you believe? It's up to you who you want to believe. Obviously, we don't have boots on the ground. We don't have eyes on the ground over there, so we don't really know what's happening. There's a lot of footage coming out that's being put out by the BLA that I would rather say don't see it, because it is disturbing, and there's bloodshed in it. So I would recommend not to see that in case you're sensitive, and so on. So I would tend to believe what the BLA is saying and not what the Pakistani military is saying, because the Pakistani military has a long standing history of lying about their casualties, of not owning up to their own dead military personnel. We've seen that over and over again. So that's what has happened. Now the question is, who's funding it, who's funding the Balochistan freedom movement, and so on. Look, I don't know. Okay, I can only speculate. Is the US doing it? Well, Pakistan is a US vassal. Why would the US want Pakistan to be destabilized? Right? Good question. Yes. Uh, okay, let's take a look at where Balochistan is on the map, because we are discussing it. So let us do that. Let's take a look at the map. Where's the map? We'll see the map. So we're looking at the western part of India, present day temporarily Pakistan, and this region here, okay, in the middle of the screen is more or less Balochistan. I can search for it. Balochistan, hey, Balochistan. That's it. And yeah, it won't give you a demarcation. If I say Pakistan, just for the sake of doing that, once again, it is not giving you any boundaries. But this region is Balochistan, and it's very interestingly the map is putting Iran actually in the center of the screen, which is interesting. This region of Iran, because Balochistan is a region that's historically, half of it is currently in Pakistan, half of it is currently in Iran. So that is the deal. Now, what was the question that was asked? Who could be behind this, right? So look, the US would probably not be behind this, because Pakistan is a US vassal, a US asset. Why would they destabilize their own asset? Could the Taliban be behind this? Well, the Taliban hates Pakistan. We know that, and they have this big territorial dispute with Pakistan, because the Pashtuns want to regain the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa region that has historically been theirs. So yes, it kind of would make sense for the Taliban to aid the BLA. That kind of would make sense. But then you also have to understand the complication which results from the fact that the Taliban receives allegedly between 30 to 50 to $100 million in cash from the US per week, which means the Afghan Taliban, is a US asset. But geopolitics is complicated. So, despite being a US asset, they may be funding the Balochistan Liberation Army. It's possible. Would Iran fund the BLA? Well, it's complicated, and probably they would not do it because half of Balochistan is in Iran. So, if you're funding the Balochistan liberation movement in Pakistan, it would also create a similar sentiment in the Iranian portion of Balochistan. And Iran has it already has enough headaches to deal with. So I don't think Iran would do that. So maybe the Afghan Taliban could be behind this. I'm just guessing. I don't know. It's a possibility, but I will categorically deny any Indian involvement in this. Will we see a free Balochistan in the future? Sooner or later, we will see a free Balochistan in the future. Sooner or later, there are so many internal forces in Pakistan that seek which seek to pull Pakistan apart at the seams. And it's only because of external interference that Pakistan remains united temporarily as an artificial geopolitical entity. It's because of the support of outside powers that the Pakistan military continues to exist, because it has no source of income. Pakistan is a nearly bankrupt nation. It has always been on the verge of bankruptcy the past 20-30 years, right? So it's because of US support that the Pakistani military currently exists. Before that, it was Chinese support. Now it's US support. US is the big daddy. So as long as Pakistan has geopolitical significance and use for the US as a counterbalance or destabilizing factor towards India, not a nice thing, but it is what it is. As long as that utility is there, Pakistan will continue to exist as a single entity. Once India becomes more powerful and Pakistan becomes less useful, Pakistan will eventually disintegrate. I hope it happens peacefully. I have no ill will towards the people of Pakistan who have been suffering since 1947, right? So I have no ill will towards the people of Pakistan. But this is an artificial, temporary nation. Its sole purpose, the sole purpose for the creation of Pakistan was to serve the geopolitical interests of external powers and not the interests of the people. So the sooner this happens, the better it is. Okay, now let's take the big question. A lot of questions about this matter, which is this: Starlink. I have received a deluge of questions about Starlink. So let's take a look at a few of these questions. Mr. 88er says Starlink has arrived in India. Is our sovereignty doomed now? Rohan says Starlink will now be available in India. Is this the first step towards vassalhood? Zeno Zenith says, has India already become a US V-word for allowing Jio and Airtel to collaborate with Starlink? Khushbu says, is India becoming a US vassal? The government has just bowed down to allow Starlink in India. Are we slowly losing our sovereignty? Priyojit Mondal says, as of now, Jio and Airlink are collaborating with Starlink and it's going to be given access to India. Is it going to be dangerous, or has the Indian government and Airtel and Jio done some tweaks which would save India's national security? I mean, the Starlink beam was already facing India's far east, northeast, and giving cookie separatists and terrorists intel from those satellites. More questions. Let's see some more. Someone says, before TRI made a decision, Ashwini Vaishnaw, the minister of the government of India, tweeted about Starlink coming to India and then deleted the tweet after a backlash. This raises concerns about India's national sovereignty and sensitive technologies. The involvement of foreign entities could lead to data access in ways that are not fully transparent. As India moves towards the Vishwaguru race, could we be stepping into Vishwa something else opposed to Vishwaguru, risking strategic areas and high stakes technologies? Satyendra says, I've been following. Okay, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. My question is with reference to an article published in the Times of India. The title is Center Sets Tough Conditions for India's Entry to Starlink. Will this move from the Indian government, as mentioned in this article, guarantee a protection from its illegitimate use when it comes to access of Starlink services in disturbed areas like Manipur, Northeast India, or a few parts of Kashmir? I remember you had pointed out similar risk when it comes to Starlink entering India in various episodes and podcasts. I've been doing that for quite some time. I have been saying for the longest time Starlink should not be allowed in India, and I've I've given a list of reasons why. Next question. Spy Wolf says, as all the Abhijit Chavda audience knows and understands, SpaceX Starlink is a threat for India's security. But recent news is that Jio and Airtel have announced an agreement with SpaceX for cheap broadband internet. Now, what's your views on that? Illegal immigrants को बाहर निकालने के लिए US से permission के लिए और कितनी चीजों उनको allow करनी पड़ेगी? EVs, now Starlink, what next? F-35. Let's take some more questions. Pranay Paul says, Starlink partnering with Bharti Airtel and Jio, is India strategically positioning itself in the global satellite internet race? Could this move reshape India's digital infrastructure while also raising concerns over foreign control of critical communication networks? How do you see this move? What difference does it make having Airtel and Jio on board instead of letting Starlink operate independently as they do in other countries? Is this a well thought out strategy by the Indian government? More questions. What's up with Starlink now? Is it over for us? I'm 17. I only make 2 prayers daily: safety of my family and prayers and progress of our country. Is the latter done for now? I can't even describe how low I am feeling right now. Indian stock picker says Starlink finally finds its way into India. Does this partnership with Jio and Airtel make it anything different, like data sharing restrictions, etc.? How should we see it from our country's defense and geopolitical perspective? Sid says it looks like Starlink has entered India with this partnership. What's my opinions? Do you think this partnership is to control what Starlink can do in India and they are not allowed to operate independently, but like a joint venture on an Indian company? And lastly, some more questions. Geopolitical Dubey says there are media reports that government of India proposed Elon Musk to establish Starlink control room in India. Do you think it will prevent the dangers? And Jason Grace says recently, yeah, we know what's happened. Are we justified to feel concerned about the supposed appeasement of Trump in order to garner his favor? Is there some deeper play going on which we might be missing? So many questions, all valid questions, right? So you may remember there was this episode of Ask Abhijit. I think it was episode 229 in sometime in the end of January, which could be called the Vassal State episode, in which I was saying that we could be on our way to becoming a US vassal state, and it's not so bad and all that. And a lot of people had said, "Why are you being so negative?" and all that. A lot of people were not happy about the things I had said. So here we are today. Yeah, Starlink is entering India. I have been saying this for quite some time. Starlink should not be allowed into India for very clear reasons. Very clear reasons. Let's say you are a rioter and you are conducting riots in some Indian city. So typically when this happens, the government will switch off mobile phone and internet services in the region, right? But what if there is Starlink available? Then the rioters can organize and do whatever they want. They can communicate as per their wishes. And even if the government switches off all local mobile and internet services, Starlink will still operate. And then what can we do? We can shake our fist at the sky, like Elon Musk would say. That's what the government can do. Or let's say you are a terrorist or a separatist, a foreign infiltrator who has crossed over from Burma into Manipur. And you are targeting civilians and flying drones and bombing the capital city with drones, right? And let's say the government is taking action against these foreigners, these foreign barbaric infiltrators. And to do that, the government switches off mobile and internet services. But what if Starlink is available? Then these terrorists will be able to operate with impunity, and Project K will continue. Let's say you are a Pakistani infiltrator into Jammu and Kashmir, into the Kashmir Valley. And there's this region in the Kashmir Valley where there's no internet, there's no telephone services, mobile phone services. But Starlink is available. I can go on and on about these scenarios, right? And the fact that Starlink is operated by a foreign entity, by Elon Musk, by the US, means that they decide when to turn it on and when to turn it off. And that's why Starlink doesn't make any sense for us to have Starlink in India. And that's what I've been saying for quite some time. And my colleague Ram Dwivedi also has said the same thing. And many other sensible people are saying this. Starlink should not be allowed into India. It will, um, compromise our sovereignty. And what do you call a nation whose sovereignty is compromised? You call it a vassal state. To some extent, not fully, but to some extent, when your sovereignty is compromised, you are not a fully sovereign nation, right? Um, so I will not comment about Mr. Ashwini Vaishnav and him deleting him first tweeting a great warm welcome to Starlink and then deleting the tweet very quickly. I will not comment about that. I will just make a note of that this happened. So now the first question that arises is what difference does it make having Airtel and Jio collaborating and partnering with Starlink, with Elon Musk, instead of letting Starlink operate independently like they do in other countries? What difference does it make? So I'm not sure what the modalities and parameters of this uh, collaboration are like. Okay, but Starlink is going to collaborate with both these companies. So maybe it means. So how does Starlink work? They have a constellation of satellites. Okay, let's look at the map of the planet, and I'll just give you an idea of how it works. I want to show you the globe, not the map, but the globe. So here we have the planet, okay, and you have a constellation of satellites, like thousands of satellites, uh, orbiting the Earth in what's called reasonably low Earth orbit, like 200, 300 kilometers above the surface of the planet, okay? And they keep on orbiting all across the all across the planet, thousands of satellites, which means that at any given point of time, let's say over India, you will have a bunch of satellites, Starlink satellites, that can beam wireless internet to you. Okay. Now, so that's basically how Starlink works. Now, you need a receiver, obviously, right? So Starlink has these receivers. These are reasonably small devices that you can put out maybe on your rooftop or outside your window or in a balcony or wherever. And as long as there's a direct line of sight with a satellite or a bunch of satellites, you will get a reasonably low latency and reasonably high speed internet. Reasonably, right? That's the deal. So maybe the deal is that Airtel and Jio may manufacture those receivers. Maybe that's the deal. So if Airtel and Jio manufactured the receivers, if the receivers, Starlink receivers, are manufactured in India, maybe we can install a kill switch in them, which will allow the government of India to uh, shut off access, switch off access. So even if the Starlink beam or signal is being received, the government can tell Jio and Airtel to switch off access in so and so area, in so and so city or village or state or whatever. Maybe that's the deal. Okay, so maybe having Airtel and Jio on board serves that purpose. So does it allow the government of India to completely control Starlink? And there's this report, like someone was saying, that the center has set tough conditions for India entry by Starlink. I'm not sure what the tough conditions are, but if Jio and Airtel are manufacturing those receivers, then maybe it gives the government of India some way of controlling access, so they can switch off uh, the internet in some areas. But let's say you are a cookie terrorist in Manipur, and you have smuggled in receivers from a different country. Let's say you smuggled them in from Thailand or wherever. Then you have a receiver that's not manufactured by Jio or Airtel. Then in that case, you'll be able to continue to receive the internet unless Elon Musk himself switches it off over India. Well, that's up to him. That's entirely up to him, and we don't control Elon Musk. Right? So that's the danger. So maybe Jio and Airtel being on board gives us a small amount of control over Starlink. Maybe there can be some data sharing restrictions. Maybe the government can switch off internet in various parts of the country as long as the receivers are Jio or Airtel receivers, right? but it completely doesn't give the government complete control. And maybe the Starlink beams are powerful enough that you can access them directly on your phones. It's going to happen eventually. Then you will not even need receivers. Earlier, you needed uplink stations. So so the Starlink satellite would send a beam to an uplink station or something on the surface of the planet, and then that uplink station would operate like a cell phone tower and broadcast the beam all across the place. Now it's not needed anymore. So you can directly receive the signal on your receiver. Probably eventually, soon enough, it will be such that you can, even without a Starlink receiver, you can directly get it on your cell phone or whatever device. In that case, well, there's no way the government of India can control Starlink, right? So what's happening? So the big question everyone is asking is, are we becoming the V-word, the vassal of the US? Look, we control our borders, right? That's number one. Number two, we control our currency. Number three, we pass our laws. We have complete control on the laws and policies in the country, right? So those things are there. Number four, we have complete control over military. Number five, we have no foreign military bases on our soil. So these are the main hardcore conditions for you to be a vassal of another country. So we don't have that. But we are essentially not technologically sovereign. We don't have technological sovereignty in India. Technologically, you can perhaps say that we are a technological vassal of the US. We don't have our own search engines. We don't have our own AI systems. We don't have satellite internet. We don't have our own global GPS. We don't have our chip manufacturing. We are in the process of setting it up, which will take a while. So technologically, we are not sovereign as a nation. We are a technological vassal of the West, of the US. We are in that position. Yes. Yes. So I would still say that India is a sovereign nation. India is not a geopolitical vassal of the US like Pakistan is, or East Pakistan, Bangladesh is, or the EU nations are, or Japan, South Korea, etc. are. We are not a vassal in that sense. But technologically, we are super deficient. We have been very short-sighted technologically, and we are a technological vassal of the US. So does the entry of Starlink into India mean that we are appeasing Donald Trump, and we have we have buckled and we are appeasing Donald Trump? Yes, it does mean that. Make no mistake about it. We are giving Trump the wins that he wants. And at what, I mean, since we have agreed to let this happen, to have Starlink into India, what are we getting in exchange right now? I mean, there has to be some give and take, right? I give you this win. What do you give me in exchange? I don't see any big win right now. But hold that thought. So ideally, if we allow Starlink to come into India, Elon Musk should have set up some Tesla factories in India or some gigafactories or whatever. Nothing of the sort. He has not even bothered to visit India. That's a big win for them without getting anything in exchange, right? So look, it's like this. The US is a super powerful nation. We are nothing compared to the US. If you have delusions that India is a great near superpower, we are not. We are not even in the same league as China or Russia. Not even close. We are the fourth most powerful nation in the world, which doesn't mean a big deal when you're comparing yourself with the US. So you don't want to be on Trump's bad side. You want to give him the wins he wants. You give him the wins when it comes to the tariff issue. Okay, you want us to cut down the tariffs? We'll cut down the tariffs. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Sorry we had kept the tariffs on. Now we will cut everything down as per your wishes. Number two, Starlink. Yes, sir. Starlink. We'll have it. We'll have it in India. Yeah, it is a big blow to our technological sovereignty, and it's going to cause issues when it comes to terrorism and infiltration and separatism and riots and all that. It will cause us issues. Okay, fine. But there is going to be a red line somewhere. The F-35. Now, if we buy the F-35, I'm going to say we are a full vassal. Okay? Trump wants us to buy the F-35. And a ridiculous piece of garbage. It's completely unsuitable for India. So if we buy that too, that's going to make me say that we are genuinely in vassal territory now. But I think at some point in time, we're going to tell Mr. Trump, look, Mr. Trump, we have cooperated with you about this matter. We gave you all the wins you wanted on tariffs. We even allowed Starlink to come into India. But there are certain things that we're going to have to say no to you, sir. And please understand, we have been extremely cooperative, but certain things we're going to have to say no to you about. So the F-35 hopefully is one of those issues, because that is going to completely vassalize us, the F-35. And also, because we have given Trump these wins, it's going to come in handy in case of future problems with China or other nations. So you've got to give the man some wins. I wouldn't have liked to see this happen, Starlink coming into India. But there we are. So yes, it's definitely appeasement of Trump. Defense and all those perspectives, it's bad for us. You know what should ideally have happened? What should have happened ideally? Geo or Reliance should have set up their own Starlink, something like GeoLink. Let's say Geo proposes to the government of India that we're gonna set up our own constellation of satellites that will be a better alternative, cheaper, faster, superior alternative to Elon Musk's Starlink. Of course, we have the technology to do that. 4, 5, 6,000 satellites. Then Reliance tells the government of India, talk to ISRO, and we are giving them 4 or 5 years to develop the technology of reusable boosters, so that we can have 1 or 2 launches every week. It took SpaceX between 2013 to 2016, 2017 to completely perfect the reusable booster technology. Just 4 years. ISRO can do it in less time and make it even better. We have the talent and the skills. So this would have turned ISRO into a gigantic behemoth of global standards if this had been proposed and agreed, that Geo launches GeoLink or Airtel launches Airtel Link, which will outcompete Starlink. And we give ISRO 4 years to develop the technology, and then we start launching two rockets a week with 100 satellites each. We have launched 100 plus satellites in the past on the little PSLV. So this could have been done. It would have transformed India into a genuine global behemoth, global power player. It would have given us global surveillance capabilities. We would not have needed so many things that we need right now. And we could even have launched our own GPS kind of system with this sort of rocket launching capabilities. But yeah, we simply don't have the vision. Of course, it costs money and all that, but everything is feasible. It's not like we don't have the money in India. So it's a huge opportunity lost. It is sad to see. I had warned multiple times against this, and it's going to cause challenges in India. Lots of security challenges. It's going to cause challenges to our sovereignty in the border regions. There is this Project K going on, Cookie Land for Christ, that will receive a shot in the arm once they start having internet in the mountains and in the forests. So it's going to be a problem. But yeah, that's where we stand today. I'm sorry I cannot give you a better, more a happier interpretation of what's happening. It is what it is. We are technologically not a really sovereign nation. So technologically, we are like 20, 30 years behind the world, when we should not be. We should not have been there, but that's where we are. Okay, next question. McLevin says European nations are concerned about the kill switch on the F-35. You've been talking about this for a long time. Finally, everyone is realizing it now. Do you think they will cancel the deal, the European nations, the deal of the F-35, of buying the F-35? Pranay Paul says, with Germany now fearing a potential US kill switch on its F-35s amid growing tensions with Washington, what does this signal for India as it reportedly considers acquiring the same jets? You have long warned about such risks, citing how the US once cut off military technology to Australia, one of its closest allies. Given this precedent, could India face a similar vulnerability? How should India deal with this, essentially? Yes, the infamous kill switch. When I spoke about the kill switch 2, 3, 4 years ago, people were like, what is kill switch? What is kill switch? I've never heard of kill switch. Today it's mainstream. Yeah, right? Here we are. A kill switch is a way of remotely disabling military technology, like missile systems, like radars, like fighter jets, like components of fighter jets, like drones, UAVs, whatever. Right? So I have spoken about this multiple times. In the 1980s, the Americans sold FA-15s to the Australians. And when the Australians got the fighter jets, brand new fighter jets, and they took them out for a spin to see what they can do, they discovered that the target acquisition system of the F-15s would lock on only to targets that the Americans had authorized. They would not lock on to practice targets or any other targets. Like what? Then what's the point of having this piece of equipment? And it was not until the 2010s, I think, that the Australians were finally able to solve the problem and crack the code. So it was a piece of overpriced garbage for the Australians if those fighter planes refused to lock onto targets that the Australians wanted them to lock onto. So the target acquisition system and the radar was compromised by the Americans. To their closest allies, they did this. You think they will give you full control of the F-35 if you buy it? Yes, India? India will not. India will first of all get an export variant of the F-35, which will be a much inferior version of the plane that the Americans and the Israelis have. And secondly, every time you want to fly it every morning, you're going to have to get an OTP from the Americans. Okay? And then you will be allowed to lock onto targets that they authorize only. Let's say tomorrow morning, for whatever reason, you to do a strike on Pakistan. It won't be authorized. It won't be allowed. Then why do we need that piece of garbage? And do you know it is one of the lowest serviceability rates in the world, the F-35? For every hour it spends flying, it has like 30 or 40 hours it needs to be serviced. Because after every flight, its radar coating, the paint, it disappears. And you have to paint the whole thing all over again. So many issues that plane has. And it's so expensive to fly. And you don't even own it, even if you've bought it. Yeah, so that's the kill switch. That's the kill switch. It can be remotely disabled. And anything that you buy from the Americans can be remotely disabled. Let's say you buy a missile system, let's say air-to-air missiles. Okay, so you have a fighter plane with an American missile on it, and you want to shoot down your enemy's fighter plane. You launch it, and let's say it refuses to lock onto the target. What you gonna do? What you're gonna do about it? Let's say you buy American drones. High altitude, long endurance drones. Okay. Now these drones, they rely on GPS and so on, which means they access the internet. And they have chips and whatever that comes from the US. And chips can have backdoors and so on. Backdoor, if you don't know what a backdoor is, look it up. So everything can be compromised. Everything can be disabled remotely. And now the Germans have suddenly woken up to this fact. It's not like they didn't know about this before, but now they are publicizing it. So will the Europeans cancel the F-35 deal? I don't know. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. What options do they have? Are their fighter planes all sovereign? I mean, for example, if you let's Google this. Um, US components on European fighter planes like the Typhoon and whatnot, Eurofighter. So let's see this. Okay, let's take a look at this. Let me remove the question. Okay, European fighter jets, US components. So the Swedish Saab Gripen, um, only a comparatively small amount of the components and systems found on the Gripen are actually designed and manufactured by Swedish contractors. Okay, a lot of it comes from the US. The General Electric engine, and many other things. Then you have the Gripen, then the Typhoon Eurofighter. So its engine is the UK's Rolls Royce. The UK is America's number one vassal. So what do you expect? And various other US contractors for the Typhoon Eurofighter: Lockheed Martin, Collins Aerospace, Honeywell, Northrop Grumman, and so on. Then the Dassault Rafale, which is the most indigenous of all the European planes, but even they have various US contractors involved. So the Americans can, if the Europeans act too smart, they can cut off access to various things to the Europeans. So my point is, even if the Europeans try, if they dare to cancel F-35 orders, they'll suddenly find that all of their military equipment, expensive fighter planes, are suddenly useless. They may find that. Okay. So that's the deal. There's nothing much the Europeans can do about this. All of their wonderful fighter planes have a large number of American components. And when you use the US components, you are always at the mercy of the Americans. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing that the Americans are doing. They are doing whatever it takes to further their national interest, as every nation should do. So it's just the way it is. So what should India do about this? We should not purchase the F-35. Please, I beg of the government of India, please don't purchase the F-35. Moving charge with the magnetic field says Russia is offering their AL-51F1 Saturn engines, the same that I use in the Sukhoi 57, for the AMCA program. Does it look like a better engine than the General Electric F414, which we were initially thinking of purchasing for the AMCA, considering it's not a super cruise enabled jet engine and doesn't have thrust vectoring? So look, there are the Saturn engine. It's a family of engines. There is the AL-31, there's the AL-41, there's the AL-51. The one that you're talking about is the AL-51F1. So the AL-31 is the engine that is used in our Sukhoi, the Sukhoi 30 MKI. We have a whole bunch of those in India, right? Big, huge beasts of planes with two Saturn AL-31 engines. So the Saturn AL-31 engine has about 76 kilonewtons of dry thrust and more than 120 kilonewtons of thrust with afterburners, wet thrust. That's the AL-31 that we use in our Sukhois. Then there's a better version of that engine called the AL-41, which is used in the Sukhoi 35s and also the Sukhoi 57. And its wet thrust, afterburner thrust, is about 170 plus kilonewtons. Very powerful engine. And then we have the latest, most advanced one, AL-51, which is still kind of under development. It is going to be used in the Sukhoi 57 and in the future Sukhoi 75, which is still under development. So the AL-51 has a dry thrust of more than 100 kilonewtons. And with afterburner, it has a wet thrust of more than 160, almost 170 kilonewtons. Pretty powerful engine. And it has the thrust vectoring component, feature. It can do thrust vectoring. The General Electric GE F414, it has dry thrust of less than 60 kilonewtons. And its afterburner enabled wet thrust is less than 100 kilonewtons. So it's not a very powerful engine. There's no super cruise apparently, I'm not sure. And it certainly doesn't have the thrust vectoring capabilities that give fighter planes super maneuverability. So any aircraft that has the F414, you will find that it cannot do the Pugachev Cobra maneuver, the Cobra maneuver. But the Sukhoi 57, good God, the things it does. So, so it's clear that the AL-51 Saturn, latest one, is far superior to the American F414. And when it comes to buying American components, there's always issues. Okay, they can deny technology, they can switch components, turn components, disable components off, and so on. I'm not sure if you can disable components remotely in a jet engine, but who knows? You better be careful. We have been using Russian engines and components for so long, we have never had these issues. We've had some other issues. That's a whole different story. But not they've never tried to deny us technology, deny us the use of what we have purchased, and they've never ever remotely disabled anything, right? So I would say we should go for the AL-51F1 or whichever engine they are giving. We don't need an engine that is the best in the world. We need an engine that's just good enough. The question really is, what are they offering, the Russians? Are they giving us a license to assemble engines in India? In which case I don't care. What I would want is the full technology, so that we can on our own manufacture these engines in India with Indian components, with Indian materials, without having to import this component or that part from Russia, or importing spare parts from Russia. Nothing from Russia. We manufacture everything in India with our own materials. That is called full transfer of technology. Are they offering us that? If they are offering us that, then we should close our eyes and buy it, whatever be the price. But I'm not sure if they're offering us that, right? So it depends on various things. If that engine is being offered to us with full technological transfer, then we should certainly go for it with our eyes closed. It's definitely a great engine. I think the AL-51 is still under development, but the AL-41 is a great engine. So yeah, if you are getting one of these engines, just go for it, buy it, and in the meanwhile keep developing the Kaveri engine. Abhijit Chavda Light says, at this time, what should be beneficial for Ukraine? What's the best action they can take to protect their country? Good question. Look, let's think about this unemotionally and logically. Ukraine is currently fighting a war against Russia, right? Special military operation, whatever you want to call it. And Russia currently controls roughly 20% of Ukraine's territory, which means Ukraine has lost sovereignty over about 20% of its territory, roughly, give or take. And this war has been going on since late February 2022. It's been more than 3 years now. Ukraine's economy has been devastated. Ukraine's demographics have been devastated. Ukraine has lost hundreds of thousands of lives, soldiers on the front lines, right? Disaster, absolute disaster for the country. So what are the options Ukraine has? Look, there are two options. Option one, fight the war and defeat Russia completely. You get it? Option one is to somehow achieve a military victory over Russia and regain all the territory and achieve whatever political gains you have. So option one is a military victory over Russia. And option two is an immediate end to the war so that there is no further loss of lives and whatnot. So if it is possible, defeat Russia militarily. Is option one of complete military defeat of Russia possible? Have you seen any sign of that in the past 3 years? No, right? Even with hundreds of billions of dollars of aid from the US, Ukraine still is in a situation today after 3 years where it has lost at least to about 20% of its territory, and it's on its knees, right? I think nobody can deny today that Ukraine is on its knees today, and it's not winning this war. And even if the Americans send another $500 billion of aid, Ukraine still can't defeat Russia because it's already used up about 500 billion or 350 billion, whatever. And there's no more ammunition left, arms left in the West to keep feeding Ukraine. Germany, France, EU, NATO, what will they do? They're not in a situation, they're not in a position to keep supplying Ukraine with an endless amount of arms and ammunition. They don't have the factories, they don't have all of that. And the US has lost patience now. How much more money do we sink in this matter? So it's clear Ukraine cannot defeat Russia militarily. Maybe they can continue the war another 3 years, which means Ukraine will be completely devastated. Nothing will be left. So option one, a military defeat of Russia is impossible. So what is the better option now? It's an immediate ceasefire and an immediate end to this madness. That is the only thing that's beneficial to Ukraine. How many more lives do you people want to lose? You have no young men left. So I think the best course of action is an immediate ceasefire. Putin doesn't have super unreasonable terms. He will retain the territory he has already taken. And he wants Ukraine should never join NATO. And so on and so forth. Agree to the terms and end the war immediately. That's the best course of action for Ukraine. Okay, another question by Abhijit Chavda Light. If European countries are not sovereign, then why are they disagreeing with Trump's peace deal in the Ukraine war? Yeah, that's a great question, isn't it? So, why are the European nations not sovereign? Have I lost my mind when I said that the European nations, EU nations, are not sovereign? Some people will ask, has Abhijit Chavda lost his mind? He is claiming the EU nations are not sovereign nations. What is he talking about? Ha 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 ha. What does it mean to be a sovereign nation? First of all, a sovereign nation, has complete control over its borders. It can decide who comes in and who doesn't come in. It can decide who can immigrate and who is not allowed to immigrate. None of the EU nations has any control over over their borders. There goes one piece of your sovereignty. Secondly, to be a sovereign nation, you need to have complete control over your laws and your policies and the policies that you implement. You decide what laws are going to be framed, what laws will be enforced, and what policies will be enforced. Your people have complete ownership over that. In the EU, none of the EU nations frame their laws. The laws come from Brussels. The policies come from Brussels. They're dictated to the nations from Brussels. So that's another piece of your sovereignty gone. Number three, a sovereign nation has complete control over its economy, which means its currency, its own currency. It should have its own currency. In the EU, none of the nations has its own currency. There's a common currency called the euro, which is a rebranded Deutsche Mark. That's another piece of your sovereignty gone. And then for a nation to be sovereign, you need to have complete control over your military. And none of the EU nations even has that. Because most of the EU nations are part of NATO. And in NATO, you don't have control over your military. So none of the EU nations are sovereign nations. And if they're also member of NATO, they are even less sovereign. And then in a sovereign nation, you have rulers or leaders who represent the people. In the EU nations, you have bureaucrats who masquerade as leaders, and they serve Brussels. They don't represent their people, and they don't serve their people. And all these EU nations are police states, where the police doesn't serve and protect the people. It enforces the writ of the bureaucrats who rule over the people. Okay? So that's the deal. That's why the European countries are not sovereign. So if they are not sovereign, why are they disagreeing with Trump, who is the president of the US, the big master, the overlord of Europe? Because since 1945, there's only been one power in Western Europe, which is the US, right? And the US is the puppet master that controls NATO as well as the EU. And the president is Trump. So why are they disagreeing with Trump? Right? That's the question. See, Trump wants to completely reshape the global order and the geopolitical balance of power. For the longest time, since 1945, the EU nations, European nations, Western European nations, have been treated like royalty. They've been given all these SOPs and all these subsidies because of which they have been turned into welfare states. They don't pay for their military expenditure. They don't pay for defense. There's so much that is subsidized by the US, and Trump wants to end all that. So that obviously will be very shaky for Europe, and it will completely shake up these people's hold over power. These little bureaucrats who rule the EU nations. They are frightened. And they are members of the ancien regime, the old regime, which was all run by the Democrats. Right? If you look at the US establishment, the so-called superficial deep state, all the bureaucrats who run the show, they're all left-leaning people. They're all people who vote for the Democrats and all. So a lot of these EU leaders, all these people, they are very strongly aligned with the American Democratic Party, not the Republican Party. They don't like the Republicans. That's another reason why they don't like Trump. So because of this, there is this big big refusal right now. There's this big resistance in the EU towards what Trump wants to do. And that's why they are disagreeing with Trump's peace deal, and they want the war in Ukraine to keep on going. And it's possible that they must be getting some benefit from the war in Ukraine. Maybe, see, the Americans have spent about 350 or maybe 400, maybe $500 billion in the war effort in Ukraine. Maybe they are getting some of that. Maybe they're getting a cut. It's possible. It's corruption. You know, the United Nations, this organization that is supposed to maintain peace in the world, and they have peacekeeping operations and all, and they've got this huge budget in the UN, right? And you know how this budget is used? A very large portion of the United Nations budget is used for business class travel and five-star hotel stays of their bureaucrats and employees. All the money is, much of the money is wasted allegedly in this manner. This is called corruption. The EU is also allegedly super corrupt like this. So all these people, they are self-serving people. They have this big network of people who are all useless, who don't serve the people. They're all self-serving people, and they want to maintain their hold over power. And that's why they are disagreeing with Trump's peace deal and opposing Trump. This is Harsh Kapoor says, in Germany, the CDU party has won the election. They came out of statement that they'll withdraw from NATO, haha. And eventually they will do away with American tyranny. Germany doing away with American tyranny. Hypothetically, if Germany does step back, then what implications can it face economically from the US? How will India be impacted, etc.? How will Putin react to this if it happens anytime soon? Does Germany have the potential to capture the whole of Europe except France and handshake with France and Russia eventually? Does this mean kicking America's backside and cutting America's access from Europe? Okay. To cut off America's access from Europe, Germany would need to take over militarily all of Europe. Okay. For that, you need a gigantic military machine. You need thousands of tanks, thousands of aircraft, millions of troops. You need a war economy. Does Germany have a war economy? Right now, there are companies like I don't know which company. Volkswagen are saying that we have some unused factories that were manufacturing cars. We can manufacture tanks in that. Volkswagen manufacturing tanks, it kind of brings back memories of the Third Reich, doesn't it? Germany doesn't have a war economy. Germany is almost in recession. It was in recession some time ago. It may be out of it now, but it's not doing well economically. And for a war effort, you need a great amount of energy, fuel. Where's the fuel going to come from? Will Vladimir Putin help them with fuel? Nord Stream 2, Nord Stream 3, whatever. Germany doesn't have the capability, doesn't have the capacity to do any of this. It's all talk, talk, talk. It's all words. No, there's no potential, there's no capacity for action. It's all words, big words. So they don't have the capability to do any of these things. And if they try to withdraw from NATO, the Americans won't allow it, and they'll make life very, very hard for the Germans. And then there's also the issue that Germany is crippled internally, right? They've got millions of horrific immigrants, the kind of immigrants no nation should allow. Those have been brought into Germany. There's all this strife within the nation, and so on. So Germany is not on strong ground, unfortunately. It's been weakened greatly. It doesn't have an army to speak of. They have the Luftwaffe, which is just symbolic, which is their air force and so on. They have American troops on their soil. The Americans control everything. There's not much the Germans can do beyond talk. So it's not going to happen, unfortunately, for them. And I think lots of nations will say, thank God it can't happen. They've already seen Germany rise in that manner before, during the age of the painter, and they would be very scared to see that happen again. So, yeah, I don't think it's possible for Germany to do that, even if they wanted to. And lastly, for any of this to happen, you need an exceptional leader. There are no exceptional or even decent leaders in Germany. It's just not there. The political system is such that only corrupt petty little people can rise to the top. Little guys, little bureaucrats. I mean, look at the past 5 chancellors they've had. Who of them was a person of substance? You're gonna say Angela Merkel was a lady of substance, a leader of substance? She's the one who brought in this huge influx of illegal immigrants into Germany. People, military-aged men from certain countries whose cultural values are completely at odds with German culture. She's the one who did this to Germany. Would you call her a person of substance, a leader of substance, and so on and so forth? So Germany doesn't produce great leaders anymore. The system ensures that no great leader is produced. So it's not going to happen. Sun Moon 0877 says, is the US going through a massive hyperinflation just like Russia faced during the 1990s after the dissolution of the USSR? Why is Trump following Russia's footsteps? Will the US have a dictator soon? So I'm not sure why you feel that there is hyperinflation in the US. Hyperinflation means like runaway inflation, not 3%, 5%. It's like 300% or 500% or 3000%. That's called hyperinflation. So let's look at the kind of inflation Russia had in the 1990s. Let me put this page on the screen and let's do a comparative analysis. So this is the hyperinflation in Russia in the 1990s. In the year 1993, 943% inflation, 94, 337%, 95, 236%, then 96, 51%. Then at the turn of the century, you again had 58%, 46%, and so on. So yeah, so these figures represent hyperinflation, more than 100% inflation. That's kind of hyperinflation. Obviously, I can give you examples of even worse hyperinflation, but you get the point. This is what hyperinflation looks like. Ridiculous inflation figures. Now let's take a look at what kind of inflation we have in the US today, shall we? Okay. Current US inflation rates between 2000 and 2025. So let's say the inflation in 2017, 2.1, 2018, 1.9, 2021, 7% inflation, then 6.5% inflation during the COVID era. And now it's 3.4, 2.9. And this year, it's 2.8% inflation in the US today. So where is the hyperinflation? You get the point? So this is not hyperinflation. This is just regular inflation. And it's definitely not out of control. So as you can see from those figures, there is no hyperinflation, massive hyperinflation in the US. Absolutely not whatsoever. So Trump is not following in any Russian footsteps. There is no hyperinflation. I'm not sure where you get this idea from, but once you see those numbers, those figures, you'll see that it's not the case. Will the US have a dictator soon? That's an interesting question. People have been trying to portray Trump as a dictator from the day he became president the first time, 2016. Oh, he has got dictatorial tendencies and so on and so forth. The US will not have a dictator. No US president will be allowed to become a dictator. Any US president who tries to become a little more powerful than is allowed to, that person gets 1963. What happened in the year 1963? Let's find out, shall we? What happened in 1963? 1963, what happened? The assassination of President Kennedy, right? Was it 1963? It was 1963. There you have it. My point is, any US president who tries to go against the establishment is going to be in danger of being 1963. And to be a dictator, you have to go against the establishment and take power for yourself. Not going to happen. Because the US is run by the deep state, the actual deep state, not the bureaucracy, something even deeper. And if you want to see a symptom of the deep state, a real symptom, you have to look at the US Federal Reserve. It's like in India, we have the Reserve Bank of India, right? Which controls the overall economy. In the US, you have the Federal Reserve Bank. Now, in India, the Reserve Bank of India is owned by the government of India. It comes under the government of India. It's controlled by the government of India, by the finance ministry. In the US, the Federal Reserve Bank is a private bank. It is not under the control of the US president. And its shareholders are not known. We don't know who owns this bank. You're not allowed to know who owns this bank. So it's the other way around in the US. The Federal Reserve owns the US economy. The government of the US doesn't own the economy. There you have a real symptom of the deep state. So the US is a dictatorship. It's a nation that's owned by a bunch of people, but we don't quite know who they are. Interesting. We think it's a conspiracy theory? Go look up the Federal Reserve Bank. Who owns it? Let's do it. Because why not? Who owns the Federal Reserve? Is not owned by anyone. It's a public agency. It's not a private entity apparently. Who are the shareholders of the Federal Reserve? Not owned by anyone, blah blah. Okay, you will never get an answer. You will never get an answer. Interesting nation, the United States. Okay, Samana Satish says there's news about Sheikh Hasina that she will return to Bangladesh. Trump in his meeting with Modiji also mentioned that Bharat is free to take care of the situation in Bangladesh. If Sheikh Hasina had to return to Bangladesh after all this, why would the US place Mohammed Yunus, the great Nobel laureate, there? What do you think is the future of Bangladesh? So there's this, Indian news channels and Indian news anchors. They have taken this statement from Trump and flown with it. Trump had said during his press meeting with Prime Minister Modi, when asked about Bangladesh, Trump said, I will leave Bangladesh to Prime Minister Modi. What Trump was doing, he was deflecting the question from the reporter. He did not want to answer the question about Bangladesh. So he just said, I will leave Bangladesh to PM Modi. And then the Indian news readers and anchors took that statement and told the Indian public that Trump is now giving Bangladesh back to India. That is such a risible interpretation, such an asinine interpretation. The US is not going to give up its asset. They have two assets on two sides of India, in the east and the west, East Pakistan and West Pakistan. Why would they give it up? Why give up your leverage over a nation like India? They'll not do it. Sheikh Hasina is not going to Bangladesh. She's not going to return. And if she does, she's not gonna be able to influence politics in any way whatsoever. If she does return, I don't see that happening. If I'm wrong, and if she does return, even then she'll not be able to participate in politics in any meaningful way. Um, so yeah, the US is not giving up its leverage over India in the form of this vassal state, Bangladesh. Not going to happen. Okay, unknown real says, I'm a lower middle class Hindu and a first year student from Bangladesh. My question is, after graduation, should I move to India or should I convert to Islam, which I don't want to do? Reason, in Bangladesh, after Hasina left, the situation for Hindus was similar to that of the Alawites in Syria for a few months. Yeah, what's happening in Syria right now to the Alawites, we know. Now the situation feels like Pakistan. However, nothing about this is shown on the news channels or social media because we receive death threats. With such security concerns, it doesn't seem possible to stay in Bangladesh. That's why I want to move to India. But after observing India's various politics and secularism, I feel that Hindus are the only enemies of Hindus in India. So I want to know, what should I do? Yeah, first of all, there is this tremendous persecution of Hindus that's happening in Bangladesh, and the media doesn't report it. Social media stays quiet about this. Yeah, we know that. Um, what should be done? And look, so you have two options, right? Um, you want to you don't want to convert to Islam. You may be, yeah, under pressure to do that. Uh, so then you have two options. You either move to India, or what else? In India, you will find, my dear friend, sadly, that Hindus are second class citizens. Okay, India is the world's most Hindu-phobic nation. Hindus have more rights in the US and in the West than in India. The constitution itself discriminates against Hindus. So if you want to have full religious freedom as a Hindu, and if you want to be able to breathe freely for the first time in your life, I would say go go and move to the West. It's so sad and so strange to give you such advice, but yeah, if you genuinely want full religious freedom and be an equal citizen like with everybody else, I think moving to the West is a good option. In India, Hindus are second class citizens. So yeah, I'm glad you are bringing this up, that there's so much persecution happening in Bangladesh against Hindus, and the media doesn't report it, doesn't cover it. So thank you for raising this issue over here. And I would suggest that if and when possible, as soon as possible, move to the West. That's where you'll be able to practice uh, your religious freedom to the fullest. Pranay Paul says, China's embassy in the US has issued a bold statement. If war is what the US wants, let it be a tariff war or trade war or any other type of war, we are ready to fight till the end. Is this just rhetoric, or does China actually have the capability and strategic positioning to back up such a challenge? How seriously should the US and its allies take this? I think the US and its allies should take this very seriously. The Chinese have the world's biggest navy in terms of numbers, and the warships are increasingly more sophisticated. The Chinese are technologically almost as advanced now as the US. The Americans tried to impose chip sanctions on the Chinese, semiconductor sanctions. The Chinese have just produced their own technology. Now they can make chips of any size, whatever dimensions it is. The Chinese have almost caught up with the US. Even without the photolithographic machines that ASML manufactures, even without that, the Chinese have been able to catch up with the US. In terms of EVs, etc., the Chinese are ahead of the US. In terms of when it comes to stealth technology, fighter planes and all that, the Chinese are almost right up there with the US. When it comes to drone technology, the Chinese are right up there, or maybe even ahead of the US. When it comes to AI, the Chinese seem to be perhaps, at least in public, ahead of the US. So the Chinese have the economy, the second biggest, largest economy in the world, right? So yeah, the US will take this very seriously. You may remember from 2007 or 8 onwards or 2012 onwards, the Chinese entered this phase that we call wolf warrior diplomacy. Their diplomats suddenly became super ultra aggressive, issuing threats against everybody all over the place. Super aggressive diplomats. And this was called wolf warrior diplomacy. And you may not have noticed that ever since COVID started, 2019, 2020, thereabouts, wolf warrior diplomacy suddenly disappeared. And the Chinese have been very quiet since then. They have been hiding their strength, like Deng Xiaoping would say. They've suddenly realized, around that time, they realized we need to just keep quiet, keep a low profile once again. So since COVID happened, the Chinese have kept a very low profile. They've stopped making threats. They've stopped pushing people around. They've been very quiet. And now, at this juncture, if they issue this statement that we are ready for any kind of war, I think the Americans need to take it very seriously. Geopolitical Dubey says, can His Holiness, the Dalai Lama's successor, be non-Chinese? And what if His Holiness doesn't announce his successor in his lifetime? The Dalai Lama's successor has to be non-Chinese. The Dalai Lama, his successor has to be Tibetan, right? So obviously it's going to be non-Chinese. So that's very clear. The Dalai Lama's successor will be Tibetan, not Chinese. Now, what if His Holiness the Dalai Lama doesn't announce, doesn't clarify the issue of his succession in his lifetime? What happens then? So, what's the issue of the Dalai Lama's succession? So, generally, when a Dalai Lama passes away, it is said that his atma, his soul, will reincarnate within a few years in a child in Tibet. And so the monks, they look for a set of signs which will be associated with the birth of the new Dalai Lama. And that's how they identify the child who is the reincarnation of the Dalai Lama. Okay, I'm saying this in very brief. Now, the present Dalai Lama is quite elderly. I hope he lives beyond 100. I hope so. But eventually he's going to have to leave his body, right? He's going to have to pass on. So then the question is, what happens then? The Chinese government would very much like to control the process of the appointment of the next Dalai Lama. So if the current Dalai Lama doesn't clarify the issue of his succession and he passes away, without doing that, then the Chinese government will take control of the matter and they will appoint their own Dalai Lama in Lhasa, who's going to be a Chinese Communist Party controlled Dalai Lama. So they will take ownership of the institution of the Dalai Lama. They will take ownership of it. Right now, the institution of the Dalai Lama is not owned by the Chinese government. It operates out of India, Dharamshala. So ideally, what His Holiness should do is he should make a clear, unambiguous declaration of how the issue of the succession should be handled. He should make it very clear where he intends to reincarnate. If he does intend to reincarnate, maybe he can say that this lifetime will be my last lifetime, and I will not reincarnate anymore. I will go and attain nirvana. So there will be no more Dalai Lamas after me. He can make that statement. If he does make that statement, then anything the Chinese government tries after this will be automatically null and void, because the Dalai Lama has said that I will not reincarnate. Otherwise, if he does intend to reincarnate after he passes on, then he can make a clear statement that I, in my next birth, will be born in so-and-so place. Maybe not in Tibet. Maybe I'll be born in India. Or maybe I'll take birth among the Tibetan diaspora outside of Tibet. Or whatever he wishes. So he needs to clarify the matter once and for all. And if he doesn't do that, then the Chinese government will take control of the institution. So let's see how it goes. Harsha Warrior says, After the recent Champions Trophy win by the Indian team, I can see a lot of articles from various foreign news outlets spitting venom. Lots of ifs and buts on the in the articles, portraying India's victory as a hollow win, favoritism, unfair politics in sports, BBC with ultra, all that stuff. What's my take on this? Keep on whining, losers. India won. Yeah, look, India got, you can say, some amount of preferential treatment. All the teams had to travel to various cities to play their matches. In India played all its matches out of one location, which was Dubai. And obviously, we will not go and travel in Pakistan because it's a terrorist nation, and the safety of our team is not guaranteed in Pakistan. So we decided to play our matches out of Dubai. It is what it is. So some people will claim that yeah, India got preferential treatment because India is the richest cricketing nation, the BCCI is the most powerful and the richest board, and so on. Let them make these claims. In the past, it was very different. In the past, it was the English, the Australians who used to run the roost, who used to rule the roost and do whatever the hell they felt like. Okay, with money comes the you get these perks, and India has not been an unfair nation. Okay, India has not been misusing its power and its clout. There are very weak teams that would not survive if India did not tour them. India even tours Zimbabwe. When was the last time Australia or England toured Zimbabwe? India tours Zimbabwe from time to time, maybe an ODI series or T20 series or whatever. We even tour Zimbabwe. The West Indies used to be one of the greatest teams of all time, the most powerful team in the world. Today, they are a very weak team, unfortunately. It's sad to say that. But India, every year or every couple of years, sends a team on a tour to the West Indies to ensure that the West Indies board has a flow of revenue and so on. India has been very fair to everybody, and yet the BBC and some of these people, they're just jealous of India's success. I'll tell you how the Australians used to do things. Okay, let me search 1994 Australia Tri Series. Okay, 1994 Australia Tri Series. Let's search for this together, shall we? 1994 Australia Tri Series. Let's search for this. 94, 95 Australia Tri Series, Tri Nation Series. I think this one. So this was, the Australians usually have a triangular tournament every year in Australia. It used to be called the Benson and Hedges World Series in the early 90s, and then the Tri Series. The 94-95 Tri Series was not a Tri Series. The Australians played two teams, Australia and Australia A, and the other two teams were England and Zimbabwe. Can you believe the Australians decided that they will play two teams internationally? They deployed two teams, Australia A and Australia, in an international tournament. If India did that today, you can imagine the kind of criticism we would cop. But the Australians and the English could get away with any kind of nonsense they wanted. Before the IPL, India did not have any power. So you know what? I would say, see, India has the kind of depth that no nation has. India can deploy a separate test team, separate one-day team, separate T20 team. India can deploy two separate test teams, two separate one-day teams, two separate T20 teams. Maybe India should take a 5-year break from international cricket and turn the IPL into a year-round tournament, like 8-9 months, like the football leagues in Europe, and have an IPL for T20s, have an IPL for ODIs, and have an IPL for tests. And we have such a vast reservoir of players. We can keep this going, and we can bring in the world's best talent by giving them the high salaries that that everybody hopefully deserves. If India does that, it's going to end cricket globally. But India doesn't do that. India is a responsible nation. And people are jealous of India. And that's why you will see all of this. I mean, one of the great West Indies fast bowlers, Andy Roberts, one of the great bowlers, he has criticized India when it comes to the Champions Trophy win. These people, I mean, Andy Roberts, you're a black man. Your people were oppressed and enslaved by the Anglos. And now you are coming and criticizing India in defense of your erstwhile oppressors. Come on, man. Sad to see this. So my point is, it is jealousy, it's bitterness that the erstwhile colonized are now the colonizers. Well, so be it. Vidhi Maniar says, I'm extreme. Okay, two questions. I'm extremely saturated working in anti-India snake pits, and I don't have the capacity anymore. What should I do? Should I mentally give up on Bharat because it's all messed up and even the system is totally self-sabotaging? What should I do? I feel broken and helpless from inside. So I don't know where you work. If you're working in an anti-India snake pit, maybe I don't know. I have no idea where you work, so I can't I can't say based on that. But yeah, if you're feeling frustrated, if you're feeling burnt out, if you're feeling all that, then for the sake of your own well-being, mental well-being, and all, you need to step away from that. Should you give up on Bharat? No, you should not give up on Bharat. Why do you need to give up on Bharat? Bharat isn't the problem. The corrupt system, the corrupt parasitic system that is sucking away the lifeblood of India, that is the problem. The corrupt system is the problem. Bharat is not the problem. So you don't have to mentally give up on Bharat. Bharat will eventually be fine. We are going through this phase, and these phases, they last decades, sometimes centuries. We are going through this phase right now. Eventually, we will come back on top. So it's a game of patience. Our patience needs to extend to centuries. You don't have to mentally give up on Bharat, but if you are trapped in a system that is so which you can't take anymore, you need to step out of it and dissociate yourself from it and go somewhere else, somewhere better. If you have to leave the country and work somewhere else, so be it. But you should not give up on Bharat mentally. You still should love your country. Okay, yeah, there are so many people who have bad experiences working in India, and they start hating India as a result. India isn't the problem. It is these corrupt, mediocre people and the corrupt and mediocre system that is the problem. And this system pushes up all the wrong people to the top, and then you feel that the whole of the country is like this, and the country doesn't deserve my love, which is not the case. Okay, so if you feel helpless, if you feel broken from inside, if you can't stand the system anymore, please move out of the system and yeah, do whatever is best for you as an individual and maybe for your family. That's what I would say. The second thing is, you only take questions from comments that feel like you're talking to your own self. There was a time when you would also take questions from the live chat, and that was really fun and interactive. The world is already irritating. I hope at least this show will retain its essence. Well, Vidhi ji, if you see episode 1 of Ask Abhijit, you will see that I took questions from the comments. If you see episode 2, I took questions from the comments. If you see the first 10 episodes, I mainly took questions from the comments. If you see the first 100 episodes, at least 70-80% of the episodes, I took questions from the comments. The essence of this show is mainly taking questions from the comments, because that way I can select the best possible questions that will give the best value to the audience. But yes, I do hear what you are saying, and of late I am almost not taking any questions at all from the live chat. So maybe I can mix and match things a little bit. Maybe once in a month you have generally 4 weeks, maybe in a month at least one episode I can do which is full live chat. Yeah, so I hear you, and I will mix it up, and let's say the next weekend's episode will be only live chat. How about that? Okay, it'll be very interactive. So yeah, I make this commitment right now. Next weekend's episode I will take questions only from the live chat. You know what? It is so easy for me to take just questions from the live chat. I don't have to do any work at all. If I take questions from the comments, I have to go through hundreds of comments, read them all, then select the best questions. It's so much time that I have to spend, so much work I have to do. If I don't take questions from the comments and just do live chat, it's so easy for me. It's easier that way. So I'm actually putting in so much more work to take the best questions. But okay, next weekend I will take questions only from the live chat, no comments. How about that? All right. Shagun Chopra says, can you please tell me how to deal with toxic people at the workplace? I mean, sometimes ignoring this isn't possible. EIR. Okay, I I I get it. Look, um, toxic people are everywhere, especially in some fields and some organizations, uh, and so on. Toxic people you will find everywhere. So how do you deal with them? It's there are multiple ways you can deal with them. The first thing is you move somewhere else. I mean, see, in an organization, you have this ladder, right? The corporate ladder. And the people who perform better, they usually move up the ladder, and the people who are toxic and useless, they stay down. So one way of dealing with them is to outperform them and pr- out promote them. Which means you get promoted, and they stay behind. But sometimes you have toxic bosses. What to do then? In that case, look, if you're stuck with a toxic boss, I would say that the best thing is to move to a different place, different organization. But typically, every organization has a certain number of toxic people, and it's like that. Um, so, what do? You If you are in an environment where you have toxic people and there's no way of removing yourself from them, then you have to somehow harden yourself. Develop a thicker skin and learn the art of verbal and other self-defense against toxic people. you know don't give them control and power over you. Push back, learn verbal self-defense, learn whatever tactics are required to prevent that toxicity from hurting you. So and how to do all that, it's a whole thing in itself. So yeah, there are two, three things you can do. One is to move out. Second is to outperform them so that you go above them. And third thing, if you simply can't escape them, then you have to develop various self-defense mechanisms, like learning what to say, how to say, develop a thicker skin, all of that. So yeah, multiple things you can do. I don't know the exact circumstances that you are in, so I can't give you any specifics. But the best possible thing is to remove yourself from such an environment and find a better place to work in, if it's possible at all. So, ma'am, all the best. I'm sorry that you are in this situation, but yeah, hopefully things work out for you. Prakhar Gupta says, why is reading history important? Most people ignore reading history and they say that it's useless. Why read history? What's the point? Why read stuff that happened in the past? So boring, all that stuff, right? That's what most people say. Look, reading history is very important. You don't know what's happening. Imagine you are a voter in an election, and you have, let's say, five candidates from five different political parties, and you have no idea about the history of this person and the history of their political party. Then how will you decide who to vote for? You have no idea what this person represents, what this person stands for, what this person's track record is like, and what the political party's ideology, track record, and past performance is like. Then how will you vote? You will basically try and see who looks the best to me, who is the most popular, who speaks the best, who gives me the best vibes. Is that how you vote? No, you don't vote like that. You need to know everything about the person and the political party and what they stand for and what they've done in the past, what the track record is. So that's why you need to learn history. That's one reason, right? By studying history, you are able to comprehend the factors that have shaped the world. Reading history helps us understand why the world exists in the current shape and form. It helps us understand where we are today and why we are here today and why it is the world is the way it is. Right? It helps us understand what are the factors and what are the things, the forces that shape the world. Studying history helps us understand change. How does change happen? Why does change happen? What are the factors that affect change, that cause change? Why do some societies thrive? Why do some societies crumble? Why do they fall? Why do empires rise and fall? Why do cultures rise and fall? Why do humans go to war? Why do nations and societies and kingdoms and empires go to war? How do people change society for the better? And what kind of people destroy society? Right? If you study history, you can learn from past mistakes so that you don't make the mistakes again. By studying history, you understand human psychology. You understand the past. You understand the cycles and the trends that happen over and over again. That way, you can predict future trends. You understand cause and effect, causality, the causal chain, right? By studying history, you can learn from the past. And by studying history, you can notice warning signs. By studying history, you can understand your culture, your civilization. You understand the strengths and weaknesses of your nation. You understand who you are. You understand your identity. And you understand who your enemies are. By studying history, you can learn decision making and problem solving and so much more. So these are some of the reasons why you should learn history. But yeah, history, the way it is taught, it's extremely boring, which is why I understand why people don't like reading history. But yeah, you got to learn it. You got to study it. Soma Chakra says, I understand that scholars and others say Afghanistan wasn't part of the Indian civilization. I don't understand that. It was, but okay. But rather belonged to the Iranian world. Okay. However, why is Khotan considered to be Iranian and part of the Iranian world instead of the Indian civilization by scholars? Is it fair to give everything Indian to the Iranians? What are your thoughts on this? Okay, let's go to the map. Where is Khotan? Gostan. Gostan. Okay. So here we are. It's India is right bang in the center. Let's go north of India. Let's go north of Ladakh. And you see something called Khotan prefecture. Okay, let's zoom in. This is historical Khotan. The terrain is very much like what you find in Ladakh. Now, if you study the history of Khotan, Khotan, you will find that it was originally called Gostan, Gosthan, Gostan. And it was founded by Indian travelers during the Mauryan era, during the time of the Mauryan Empire, the time of Emperor Ashok and his successors. Around that time, that's when Khotan was founded. So it's clearly something that was founded by Indians. But yeah, you will have historians and scholars who will say that it's Iranian. So you will find this tendency among all these scholars and historians to try and make everything Indian Iranian. First of all, this name Iran, it's a modern name. The name Iran came up in the early 20th century. And Iran was always called Persia for thousands of years. Since about 1000 BC, roughly, it was called Persia. The Persian people were the descendants of the Parshva clan of Vedic Indians. Parshva. Their capital was called Parshvapur, Persepolis. The Greeks called it Persepolis. The origins of Persia themselves are Indian. But people try to retrofit everything. Whatever you see today, you try to fit it backwards. You try to superimpose today's worldview and today's whatever is happening in the world on the past. So if you look at Persia today, it's not very Persian. At least about half of the people of Persia are not Persian today. There are so many people in Persia who look like Europeans, right? They've got blonde hair and blue eyes and white skin. The real Persians look like this. Light brown skin, brown eyes and dark hair. I don't have dark hair anymore, but you get the point. This is what Persians look like historically. Their kings wore dhotis. Do you know that? Don't believe me? I'll pull out a okay, I don't have the time to show that, but yes. So Persia itself was Indian. But today, historians want to steal everything away from India and ascribe it to everybody else, to somebody else. So the neighboring daughter civilization, Persia, is the best fit for them. So even Khotan is Persian, even Afghanistan is Persian, everything is Persian. They even have something called Iranian ancestry these days. in genetics. So these are simply attempts to try and take credit for everything away from India. And it's kind of funny, and because it's not going to last forever, lies eventually are caught. So my thoughts, I don't care. Let them try and do this. Facts are facts. Khotan was founded by Indians. It was Indians. Kashgar was Indian. We want to see where Kashgar is. Let's go back to the map. So Khotan is right here. It's this oasis north of Ladakh. Where is Kashgar? Shall we find Kashgar? Here it is. This here is Kashgar, further north from Khotan, to the northwest of Khotan. Kashgar. Do you know what Kashgar was called until the 19th century? Until the 19th century, Kashgar was called Kashinagar. All right? Kashgar was called Kashinagar until the 19th century. Now it's called Kashgar. So a lot of history is lies. I mean, if the news is fake, imagine how fake history is, right? There you have it. Vikramaditya Rathore says, how did the Spanish mismanage the immense wealth stolen from the Americas, ultimately weakening their power compared to the UK and France, España, Spain. So Spain plundered a tremendous amount of gold and wealth from the Americas. Tremendous amount of wealth, gold and silver from the Americas. And this immense influx of bullion, raw gold and silver from the Americas, it should have made Spain Europe's wealthiest and most powerful nation, right? And yet this did not happen. Spain never became a superpower. It was a superpower until this whole influx of gold started into Spain. I mean, when the Spanish Armada tried to invade and conquer England during the reign of Queen Elizabeth, at that time England was a second-rate world power, and Spain was the great superpower at the time. And yet in 100 years, despite all the immense wealth it plundered from the natives, from the hapless natives of the Americas, Spain became a third-rate world power. So what happens? So what happened? So there's a number of reasons, obviously. First of all, these precious metals that the Spanish stole from the Americas, the Spanish, they treated this as a quick source of revenue. And the Spanish monarchs used this to finance their extravagant lifestyles and their continuous warfare. They thought this gold and silver is just so incredibly abundant. It's flowing like a river from the Americas. So let's just keep burning it as fuel. They did not invest any of it in local industries, in infrastructure, in trade routes, in agriculture, whatever. They invested nothing. What they did was they kept on importing manufactured goods from other places in Europe instead of producing them domestically. They never became a manufacturing economy. They simply thought, we have this endless supply of wealth, let's just buy whatever we want from other countries. No foresight. And then there was this chronic warfare that the Spanish crown enjoyed. So the Spanish kept fighting numerous wars. They had wars against Italy, in the Netherlands, even against the Ottoman Empire. And to have this continuous warfare, you need a huge military, you need a big navy, you need lots of soldiers, you need to hire mercenaries, you need foreign supplies because you're manufacturing nothing. So the Spanish monarchy spent enormous sums of money to maintain this army and this continuous lifestyle of continuous warfare. So whatever new wealth kept on flowing from the Americas, it got drained away almost as soon as it arrived. Okay? And it's not just that. They used the wealth from the Americas to finance their warfare. On top of that, the Spanish kings and monarchs, they took huge debts on top of this. So this huge amount of money that's flowing in every day, It's not enough. They needed more. So they took big debts multiple times to finance various wars, and they had to even declare bankruptcy multiple times. And obviously, when you have big debts, you're gonna have interest and so on and so forth. So it doesn't work. And because so much gold was coming into Spain, it caused significant inflation in their economy. And what happens is that only some people have the gold, right? There's a lot of gold coming in, but it's the royalty and the nobility who hold the gold. So the prices go up because there's so much gold in the market now. But the prices go up. But what about the peasants and the poor people? They don't have any gold, but the prices have shot up, so they become super poor as a result. So the cost of living soared for the non-royal, non-noble people, and the cost of waging war also went up, and so on and so on. So they did not invest in manufacturing. They did not invest in industry. They did not invest in trade routes. They did not invest in controlling foreign ports. Nothing. Extremely short-sighted. They did the exact opposite of what the English did. So that's why Spain, this what you see generally when somebody wins a lottery, the vast majority of people who win a big lottery, they become broke in 2 3 years because they've never had wealth. Suddenly there's this big amount of money, millions of dollars that they have, and they just start splurging it without any kind of plan. And in 2 3 years they go broke and they go back to their original job if they're lucky. So that's the kind of approach and attitude Spain had. And the English were very different. They were very hard-headed in their approach to colonizing the Americas. And that's why they succeeded. And if you want to understand this whole matter, watch my Understanding America podcast, in which I go into exactly these things. All right. Apurva Bharadwaj says, I've been noticing in my surroundings that despite being a relatively proud Indian who's proud of his culture, I would maybe prefer going to a church at times than a temple. Me and my peers could listen to local Spanish and Western songs, but would cringe when we hear Lok Geets at times. And many more cases. I don't know how this resistiveness has been ingrained into my blood. How do we make the coming generation be more proud of their culture? I'll tell you why everyone feels this way. It's because everything Indian has been portrayed as uncool. It's not cool to be Indian. It's not cool to be Hindu. A temple is not cool. Everything foreign and Western is cool. The Indian accent is not cool. The Spanish accent, oh, senor, is so cool. But the Indian accent is so dirty. Oh, no, no, no. Right? The Latino accent is cool. L'accent français is très cool. But the Indian accent is bad. And so on. So everything Indian is portrayed as uncool. Hinduism is portrayed as uncool. And the system in India ensures that everything Indian, everything indigenous remains shabby and dirty. You go to temple premises anywhere, you'll find that the temple authorities have no money for the upkeep of the temple. So it's shabby. There is no space, sacred space around the temple. There's all kinds of dirt around the temple. So you don't feel like going to a temple. It's not a very nice environment to go to. Most often, it's like that. There are very few temples that are very clean. Look at the temples that you see in Thailand, for example. Hindu temples. Beautifully maintained, well painted, so pretty, so aesthetic. Because so much money goes into the upkeep of the Vishnu temples and the Hanuman temples and the Shiva temples in Thailand. Look at Hindu temples in Japan. The temples of the Kami Benzaitin, also known as Saraswati. How beautifully they're maintained. And look at the same temples of the same deities in India. How poorly they are maintained, because the money that is donated by devotees to the temple is stolen by the government. So everything in India, when it comes to Indian culture, Hinduism, whatever, is shabby. It's in disrepair. All our historical monuments are shabby and in disrepair. The ASI maintains the monuments of invaders. If you go to historical temples, all the murtis have their faces and arms and various body parts hacked off, right? There's no promotion of Indian culture. There's no money spent by the government, not enough money spent by the government to promote talented artists who would make Indian culture cool again, Indian art cool again. The most profoundly beautiful form of music in the world today is Indian classical music with a system of ragas. You have no idea how incredibly brilliant the system is. The greatest system of music ever devised. No one even knows about it in India. All you know is Bollywood songs and foreign songs and all. So it's because there has been uh, this push, this concerted effort to make everything Indian uncool, that most people feel this way. What Apurva is mentioning down here, right? So how do we make the coming generation be more proud of their culture? First of all, be aware of your culture. Recently, I mean, yeah, I might as well say this. This new music video came out by somebody called Hanuman Kind. I had never heard of the guy before. I am not into rap music, but the music video is incredible. It's awesome. The guy, his name is Suraj something. He's from Kerala, and he has made this video which showcases Indian martial arts traditions from various parts of India, from Maharashtra, from Kerala, from Manipur, from Punjab. Indigenous martial arts traditions. They are so incredibly, I mean, breathtaking. And most Indians didn't even know that this existed in India, right? So we need to become more aware of of the incredible beauty and brilliance of our culture. And the system ensures you don't do that. You don't get that. We have the only education system in the world which doesn't teach children their own culture and so on. So that's why we are detached from our culture. We are deracinated. Generation after generation, we move further and further away from our culture. So most Indian kids today, they don't know what their culture is. They see it as something alien, the way a person from England would see Indian culture. That's the same way Indians see their culture today. And that's why you would be happier and more comfortable going to a church and listening to Despacito or whatever. So yeah, we need to make Indian culture cool again. Aesthetics matter, right? So yeah, it's a work in progress. Nachiketa says, I am currently an 18-year-old in Bangalore, from Bangalore. Do you think it's better for someone like me to aspire for a future in Bharat or aspire to immigrate? For example, work towards an O1 visa, which is, I think it's called a genius visa, person with outstanding abilities, American visa, right? I may not be a fan of the governmental or bureaucratic establishment, but I do love my motherland. How do you see the Indian landscape into the early 30s of my generation? Look, India is not going to change drastically in the next 20, 30 years, 20 years. You will not see tremendous drastic change and reforms in India next 20 years. Not going to happen. The system is too deeply entrenched, and you will not see big bang reforms and complete overhaul of the system. I am glad that you do love your motherland, and I'm glad to hear that you're somebody who aspires to have something like an O1 visa. The O1 visa is for persons of extraordinary abilities. I think it's also called the genius level visa. If you are good enough to get that, I would suggest you go and get the O1 visa. Go to the US. You don't have to stop loving Bharat, your motherland. You can continue loving your motherland. What you can do the next 20 years is go work in the US, acquire all the experience you can, acquire all the talent, or also not talent, all the experience and all the skills you can, and more importantly, all the money you can. Become as wealthy as you can. And then reassess where you are and where Bharat is in 20 years' time. Let's say by the time you're in your late 30s, you are a billionaire, let's say. Then you may think of coming back to Bharat and serving your motherland. Because right now, you're an 18-year-old kid, you don't have any real money of your own. Obviously, no 18-year-old has any real money. And if you stay back in Bharat with your genius level talent, I think the system will not give a damn about your talent. Do you remember Ramanujan? He was a genius. He was nearly destroyed by the system. He is known today because an Englishman discovered him. If it was in the hands of the Indian bureaucrats, he would have been destroyed and nobody would have remembered him. So, my point is the system will not care about you. The Indian system is such that it seeks out and destroys talent, and it seeks out and rewards mediocrity. If you are a person of extraordinary abilities, get the hell out of India. Next 20 years at least, become a billionaire, and then if India is ready for you, you may come back at that point to Bharat and serve your motherland. So, yeah, um, that's what I would say. I'm glad you love your motherland, as we all do, but that's the best course of action for you, in my opinion. Okay, let's take some questions from the live chat now. What's going on in the live chat? Okay, I haven't seen. So, all right, if you have any questions that you would like to ask me, I will take some questions from the live chat at this point in time. I already discussed Starlink, so there's no point discussing it again. I don't know what Velpari is, so I will not take that. What is Velpari? Rocky Roo says, what's Velpari? Isabella says, if you lose your Indian culture, how can we appreciate the Indian culture in the future? That's right. So we should not lose our culture. Look, the world is beautiful because it's diverse, not because there's every culture in the world in one city. No. What makes the world beautiful is that when you travel from one country to another, you see different cultures, different lifestyles, different ways of clothing, different cuisines, different music. That's what makes the world so beautiful. So I think every culture needs to have its own space. Indian culture in the subcontinent, uh, Spanish culture, flamenco in Spain, French culture in France, Italian culture in Italy, Rus culture in Russia, and so on and so forth. Various Native American cultures in the Americas, Asian cultures in various parts of Asia. That's what makes the world beautiful. So we need all these cultures to survive and thrive, especially Indian culture, which is probably the oldest known culture in the world right now. So yeah, I agree. Now, what other questions do we have? Kapalin says, what's your view on Manipur under president's rule? I think it's early days. It's too early to pass judgment. President's rule is very new in Manipur. And yeah, there are problems, right? So the governor had given a certain deadline for everyone to lay down their arms. And we know there are two main ethnic groups right now that are in the eye of the storm right now: the Meiteis, the indigenous people of Manipur, the Hindus, and the foreigners, the cookie infiltrators. So apparently the cookies are not giving up their arms. That's for years. And the government has said that there'll be free movement in the state. The cookies are blockading roads and doing all kinds of violent activities and stuff. So yes, there are challenges right now. And I wonder how much patience the government of India will have towards the foreigners. I mean, yeah, we'll see. So right now, I don't have any views. It's too early to say anything. But at some point in time, I think the government of India should act and do the right thing for the citizens. Okay. What else? Darshan says, any updates on GE engines on Tejas? Is US delaying this on purpose to keep IF modernization under control? It's a pressure tactic over India. It's to show that we have so much leverage over you. We can stop your entire aircraft program, fighter plane program from progressing. It's to delay the Indian Air Force's modernization. The Tejas is a very good fighter plane, one of the best fighter planes, small fighter planes in the world. But if it doesn't have engines, what will it do? What will you do with it? So I don't know about any updates on the GE engines, the Americans, whether they are sending more engines or not. We need alternatives. We cannot rely on the Americans. We need to be able to build engines entirely in India using only Indian components and materials, which means that we need to either develop our own engine or have a complete transfer of technology from somewhere, wherever from, whether it's Russia, whether it's France, whether it's whoever else, doesn't matter. So we need that. Um, McLevin says, why are we prioritizing manned missions to Mars over exploring our oceans, given that only 20% of the world's oceans have been explored? Well, the world is so large out there, and under the oceans, we don't quite know what's there. There are some parts of the oceans where you have resources like nickel, like iron, or various other minerals and whatnot. But it's so difficult to go all the way down there and extract that. And so the ocean, the sub surface environment of the oceans is a far more difficult place to explore than maybe Mars. That's how it is. So there's multiple reasons, including the fact that it's so difficult to go down there. And if you go like several kilometers below the ocean surface, you will find that the conditions there are almost alien to us. Incredible pressure, water pressure at that depth, and the temperatures are very cold. And if you want to survive there, you need a very, very specialized submarine. Your regular submarines will just implode uh, below a certain depth, called the crush depth of a submarine. So it's so difficult. There's no light down there, so it's almost like an alien environment. So it's actually easier to explore uh, other planetary bodies than the sub ocean environment in some cases. Okay. um Badass Ravi Kumar says, do you trust China? I trust every nation. I trust every nation to do whatever is in their best interests. So if you want to know whether to trust a nation or not, you have to understand what is their perception of their national interest. If you know what's going on in their minds, then you know how they'll behave, and then it's fine. So you can trust every nation to prioritize its national interest over every other nation's interests. So yeah, I trust China to do that. Do I trust China to be our friend? There are no friends in geopolitics. The point is, the the question of trust doesn't arise in geopolitics. You don't trust anybody in geopolitics. You have to understand each nation and its perception of its interests. And when you have two nations whose interests converge to some extent, those two nations can cooperate in a mutually beneficial manner. And when you have two nations whose interests are wildly diverging and mutually non beneficial, those two nations will never be at good relations with each other. So, from my perspective, China is an independent nation, an ancient culture that has the right to pursue its national interest. And sometimes its national interest, its perception of its interest, will bring it in territory that is, you could say, hostile to India or conflicting with India. So we have to know that this can happen and this will happen, and we have to take adequate steps to ensure it doesn't harm us. The question of trust, blind trust, simply doesn't arise in geopolitics. All right. Um, Abhijit Chavda Light says, why cannot we reverse engineer the engine of the Rafale, just like you said, buy, beg, borrow, steal? We can reverse engineer the design, the blueprint. Okay. So let's say we take one engine. We have what, 26 Rafales? Let's say we take out one of those Rafale fighter planes. Okay. And we use it only for research purposes. So we have 25 left. And one Rafale, we're going to do research on it. We open it up, we take out the engine, and we dismantle the engine step by step so that we know how every single component is designed and built. So then, by doing this process, and because we have such talented engineers, we'll be able to create our own blueprint of the Rafale jet engine, right? The jet engine, which belongs to a company called Safran, I believe, which it's manufactured by Safran. So we can create our own blueprint, which can exactly replicate all the components of this engine, and yet it will fail. Why will it fail? Because there is a technology called single crystal blade technology that we don't have. You see, the turbine blades inside the jet engine have to operate at incredibly high pressures and temperatures that will melt steel. So how come these turbine blades don't melt? Because they are grown out of a single crystal of metal. It's an alloy. It's, I don't know what, nickel something alloy. So it's a single, each turbine blade is a single crystal. Okay, and they have holes and air vents and stuff inside. It's incredibly difficult to manufacture that. It takes decades of trial and error to do that. So you can create a replica of that uh, jet engine turbine blade using steel or whatever metal you have at your disposal, and you put that engine together and you try and fly it. You try and ignite the jet engine, and you will find that the blades will melt. So that's the problem. So yeah, we need to acquire the technology somehow. How to um, grow those crystals. Um, Abhijit Supreme Lord says, "Why is Russia left out in the AI race?" I don't know. Um, as far as we know, they have not announced any AI system like the Chinese have with DeepSeek R1 and Manus, and the Americans with their various things, and the French have Mistral. The Russians don't seem to have any AI. Maybe they are hiding their capabilities. Maybe they have an AI system or multiple AI systems and they haven't announced it. Or maybe they are genuinely left behind. If they are genuinely left behind, why is that? Maybe because they don't have access to the chips like the Chinese and the Americans do. And the Chinese can manufacture their own chips. The Russians probably can't. So maybe that's the reason why. Maybe that's the reason why. And that is not good. That is not good at all. So maybe they'll be doing something about it, but nothing is visible. It may be all behind closed doors. Okay, maybe we can take one more question. Let's take one more question and then we will end this session for today. What do I take? Okay, why only Russia and China have a space force? The Chinese have recently announced a space force. Recently, there was this news of an asteroid that had a small probability of hitting the Earth in 2032. Now the probability has gone to zero. But when this news came out in the public domain, the Chinese set up a space force. So the Americans have a space force, the Russians have one, and now the Chinese also have one. Why don't we have one? Because kya zarurat hai? Why do we need one? So only nations that see themselves as great powers and nations with great ambitions, they are the ones who set up space forces. We have all the ability, but we're not doing it. We should have a space force, I would say. All right. And with that, I'm gonna end today's session. We've all, as always, crossed 2 hours. So thank you so much, everybody, for all the questions. It was fun taking questions at the end from the live chat as well. And please keep asking questions, and I will take your questions once again during next weekend's episode, in which I will take questions only from the live chat, as promised earlier. So thank you so much, everybody, and take care and keep asking questions, keep raising your standards, and I'll see you very soon in next week's episode. Until then, take care.